Telecom TV.
Telecom TV, where I see through.
You're watching Telecom TV. Hello, welcome again to Telecom TV. I'm Martin Warwick. We're here at day 3 of Communicasia in Singapore, and I'm delighted to say that I'm talking with an old friend here, Saeed Khan, who is a man of many parts and of several hats, which I'll explain in a moment. Abu, welcome. You're here under a guise of, first of all, you used to be a journalist.
Yes, I was.
So you've gone from one side of the divide to the other. You are the Secretary General of the Association of Mobile Telecom Operators in Bangladesh.
Yes, I am.
And you are also Senior Policy Fellow with Learn Asia.
Indeed.
Now, this is a big show. There's 50,000 odd delegates here. It's a place where people network, where new technologies are brought to the fore, where strategy is discussed. And it's also a place where new ideas are floated in various fora. And you have been doing this, and you have a different take on the way in which you think infrastructure in parts of the developing world should be constructed, financed and so on. Tell us about it.
Well, Martin, it's actually nothing new. What I'm telling is we have crossed the era of mobile voice. And as you know, and everybody knows, that Asia has been driving the growth worldwide of the mobile voice. Now we have entered into the era of broadband, and mobile has been obviously driving this growth. But in mobile broadband, the raw material is internet bandwidth, and the wholesale cost of internet bandwidth in Asia, across Asia, has been 6 times higher than Europe. So if the cost of raw material remains so expensive, how can you think of making internet a voice-like growth in Asia? And what really surprises me, many reputed analysts often say that the growth of broadband shall come from the developing worlds, but the main revenue will come from the developed world. To me, it's an oxymoron. How can you think of a rational business plan? So the reason Asian internet bandwidth has been expensive is, although it's the world's largest landmass, but the countries has been behaving somewhat like an archipelago as long as interconnecting each other's internationally. It's totally dependent on submarine cable. And as you know, submarine cable has been vulnerable to various factors like natural disaster, even accidental submarine cable cuts. So those risk factors are embedded into the cost of internet bandwidth that is being transported through submarine cable. Therefore, what I am suggesting is Asia must go full-blown terrestrial. Mind it, I am not at all discounting submarine cable. What I am saying is, in addition to these submarine cables, Asian countries must interconnect each other terrestrially, as the European countries have done. And that's why cost of internet bandwidth is so low.
I take your point, absolutely. We're talking about vast distances here in scale. Europe, by comparison, can fit into several of these countries several times over. So how do you think you could effect this? Is there one highway, one road, one set of basic physical infrastructure you can lay cable along, underneath or through?
Yes, actually there is one. You know, way back in 1950s, the United Nations ESCAP took an initiative called the Asian Highway, which spans from Japan all the way to Turkey, crisscrossing 32 countries. We are talking about more than 142,000 kilometers. That highway network is now fully functional, and it has been inherently a meshed highway network. And therefore, if you just follow this highway, keep on laying the fiber. As you know, Martin, roads and highways has always been the most preferred right-of-way for any long-haul optical fiber transmission backbone. So, just following the old theory, lay the fiber, lit it up, the entire continent is interconnected.
Well, that sounds great, and I agree with you. It would be wonderful, in theory, What about the practice, Abu? You said 32 countries?
Yes, 32 countries.
Right. All with different political regimes, regulatory authorities, social, economic outlooks and so on. And many of whom, some of whom are rich, many of whom are poor. Who is going to pay to do this? First of all, how are you going to get 32 countries, even though they're not contiguous and they're just neighbours, how are you going to get them to cooperate together to do this, and who's going to pay for it?
Well, first of all, how am I going to assemble them? They have already been assembled in terms of submarine cable deployment. Look at SIMI-V3. We are talking about early 90s, pre-mobile era. All these countries have decided to link each other physically. Countries like Pakistan and India, no argument. They were very happy to do it. And the NOC of SIMI-V3 is in India, and Pakistan never had any issue, or no other countries had any issues with that. Same goes with SIMI-V4. And if you look at these two submarine cable consortium, predominantly the state-owned PTTs are the drivers of it. Therefore, governments have already joined hand while interconnecting each other through submarine cable. Now, if you talk about countries having political differences, take an example of India and China. 3 Indian carriers, Reliance, Tata and Bharti, has linked with China Mobile terrestrially across the Tibet. So what does it prove? It proves that no matter what the politicians think, the telecom entrepreneurs, private sectors, they succeed to bridge the gap and overcome all these political hurdles. And if you show the benefit of this interconnection, as we have shown the governments the benefit of spectrum. Imagine pre-mobile era, radio spectrum was a highly sensitive military taboo.
Absolutely.
Nobody was even allowed to think of touching it. Look at it, what has happened. Apart from Myanmar and North Korea, in every country, radio spectrum is now available for the private sector. So government never earnestly come forward with any reforms. It's the technology that drives the governments to think twice and think progressively. Once you can show the governments the tangible value of this connectivity, I'm sure they will be forthcoming, as they have already decided to interconnect each other through the road highways. What is the big deal about telecoms? Nothing.
Okay, take your point again, but what about, who's going to fund this? You say private companies might do it. What about major bodies, the World Bank, for example, or the Asian Bank, or various development bodies and funding and so on? What about the United Nations?
Well, what I'm ideally looking at is a public-private partnership, multilateral donors, private funding, national funding. It could be the combination of anything. But before that, what I emphasize is the governments should agree to conduct a study, look at this project, look at various issues of it, and then once you come up with a highly viable commercial proposition, trust me, fund is never going to be an issue.
You're very sure about that, and you're an optimist, I'll give you that, Abu. I can see a great deal of benefit from it. Practicalities, I think, might be rather more difficult. What kind of a timescale do you have in your head for this, or do you think it will be picked up? I know for a fact, I've spoken to a lot of people around here, that the paper you gave and the keynote you gave about this was very well thought of and very well accepted, and people liked it a lot and said it was very thought-provoking. But thought-provoking is one thing, turning it into reality is something else.
Well, over here we are talking about 2 entities. One is UNESCAP, which has been fostering the Asian Highway.
Yep.
And then I'm talking about ITU, where all the countries in the world are member, they're telecom segments.
Yep.
And both the UN outfits are working under the one UN umbrella. So the members of UNESCAP are by default the members of ITU. And it is fundamentally the obligation of these 2 UN outfits to call the member states and explain it to them. That should be the most credible platform, and that will convince the investors, no matter from what background, to come and finance this.
Hamadoun Touré, the Secretary General of the ITU, was here at the show. He's in Cambodia now, we know that. You were on a panel discussion with him. Did you discuss this with him, and what was his immediate sort of response?
Well, Hamadoun Touré had immediately loved it. He said it's a great idea, and he also said that ITU has formed the Broadband Commission, and my proposition captures everything the Broadband Commission aspires. And he said he will do his best to convince the member states, and he will take it forward.
So what's the next step for you?
For me, basically, what I am trying to do is to sensitize the stakeholders, the carriers. It has to come from them, because they are the biggest beneficiary of this. And when I say carriers, there are two layers. One is those who are into wholesale bandwidth selling, as well as those who are into retailing. That means the mobile broadband deliverers.
Yeah.
They have to join hands, and they should persuade their respective governments that, look, that's the greatest opportunity for us. We can thrive. If we thrive, governments also thrive. If the carriers make more money, they pay more tax to the government. So it comes to everybody's interest. So carriers should also be coming forward and persuading respective governments to materialize this project. And at the same time, few little countries, like, as you know, 3 out of the 4 BRIC countries are sharing the common border, and they are into Asian highway, Russia, India, China. They should be also taking leadership in this event. As you know, in any submarine cable consortium project, when it kicks off, few countries take the leadership role and the others come in. So the job of these leaders is to explain the viability of this project and convince the governments, the financiers, everybody. And it will be obviously a multi-vendor project. The world's leading vendors and component makers, everybody will come into it. So they all should come, sit down, study it, and give their views.
You're going to continue to champion this on top of your 2 day jobs, which, I mean, just running the Association of Mobile Telecom Operators of Bangladesh must be enough to make most people quail in their boots. So all I can say to you is real food for thought. Abu Saeed Khan, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks for your time.
Great to see you again.
What a pleasure.
Thank you.
Telecom TV, where I see through.
You're watching Telecom TV.